Welcome to Music Cosmos, whoever is watching right now or whoever is going to be watching this later. My name is Bruno Justi here with Be My Ears and Music Cosmos. We have some incredible guests today. It's going to be really fun. Before we start this, I just wanted to share a couple of slides, some announcements. So bear with me. Let me do this again. Let me share my screen once again. And here we go, sharing my screen. All right, here we go. This is Music Cosmos, right? So basically, just a brief introduction about the project. This project was born with the idea of creating an environment where, music industry professionals like us, like you guys on the other side of the screen, can network. It's a space for people to showcase as well. And so we all can learn. Our live events before COVID, they were happening in Brazil. They were also happening here in LA. And we plan to resume those events as soon as we can. And while that doesn't happen, why not gathering online to keep this community alive, right? So that's what we're doing here right now. So for this particular series, we are gathering with these incredible professionals, like industry professionals, composers, music producers, engineers, to talk and discuss a little bit about the world of music for film, TV, advertising, games, and things like that. And also before we move on to the talking part, this is very important that I wanted to share the essence of this community. We really, really, really need more of this, the stuff that's on the right side of the slide. We need more interaction. We need more community. That's what drives this community. And we need less of the left side of the slide, which is just like one person talking and all the other people just listening. So this is the goal. The goal is that we can all interact, we can all ask questions, and we can all learn from, our own experiences. So that's why we're here today. Another very cool thing, 60%, 63% of the people who signed up for this panel are composers or songwriters. 27% of us are producers or musicians, instrumentalists. And 9% of us are industry professionals who work at various companies, not performing, not singing, not producing, but in the industry. We have people today from Australia, from Austria, from Brazil, Canada, India, Mexico, Sweden, the UK, and from the USA. So it is really, 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 really cool to have all these people together, talking about this very important topic. So we're really happy that you guys are here. Another very important thing, thank you to our partners at Be My Ears, Spitfire Audio, Larson Mastering. It's a studio here in LA. They do mastering. Maran Música is a marketing company from Brazil. And Mohawk, Grecco is here. He can talk a little bit about Mohawk or his work specifically. He's going to talk about his work. Thank you, Grecco. And a couple more things about Spitfire Audio. They're one of our partners, and they are offering to all people who register to these events, they're offering free and instant access to their Discover package, which costs like $50. So look at your email. See if there should be an email there with a link and a promo code. And we're also gonna add the link in the Q&A section on this panel. So it is there in your email. If not, you're gonna find it here. And lastly, we do have another panel already scheduled for. It says December here. There's a mistake here. It's for January 16th. And on this panel, we're going to have Gustavo Borner and Ruben Cohen. Both of them have worked in major blockbusters, right? Like film and games. Gustavo has worked on Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad, Finding Nemo, and then Ruben, a bunch of artists from Metallica to Foo Fighters, The Queen's Gambit, Game of Thrones, and a bunch of other incredible projects. So there's also going to be a link here in the description. Just click there, sign up, and we'll see you guys again back in January 16th. And those were the announcements that I had for today. And now, sorry guys, here I am again. Let's start this. I would love to welcome Jeremy Underwood. Thank you again for being here.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brad Haehnel, is that the right way to say? Perfect.
Haehnel, but yeah.
Haehnel. Grecco Buratto or Grecco Buratto. Thank you again, bro, for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And Martina Albano from Italy.
Yes.
Albano.
Correct? Perfect.
Oh, Albano.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Martina. Just a quick note. Carla, she's on the Q&A or chat here. She's our partner. She's in São Paulo, Brazil. And she's the one sharing the links with you guys. There is one link in particular that I would love to, go back to it. It's a Google Doc Excel file. If you guys feel like it, whoever is watching this panel now or later, you can go there and leave your information, your name, where you're from, what is the thing that you do, what you were looking for, your email address and things like that. Feel free to network with the participants who are part of this panel. I think this is also a very important thing of being part of a community, right? That we can create these particular moments where we can network with other people, colleagues, and industry professionals. So do that. I see that there's a lot of people already like adding their information. So cool. Let's start. Again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everybody. Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about what you do? What is the thing that you do?
Currently, I am the house audio engineer for Sony Interactive. So I actually sort of record all the dialogue for all of our video games and maintain the computer systems for our sound design team, our dialogue team, as well as the mocap stages.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And before that, what was your? Because I remember you used to work here in Pasadena at Firehouse, right? And then the studio unfortunately shut down.
Yeah, it's a chicken joint now. It's very weird. Go back. They kept the sign up. I was the house engineer at Firehouse Studios in Pasadena, so we did tons of film score stuff there, ADR, records. It was kind of this sort of magical place of all of it, which was really cool because it wasn't like, it's nice to lock into a style, but every once in a while, it's nice to do a record date here and there. And so it was an awesome place. I was there about 6 years. Before that, I was at a studio called Day 7 Studios and worked with a producer named Howard Benson. So we did Daughtry and Santana and Creed and 3 Days Grace and Three Doors Down and stuff like, tons of rock bands like that. I worked with John Mayer while I was there and Marilyn Manson. And then prior to that, I was at a studio called Signet Sound in Hollywood. That was a major scoring facility, big tracking room, full film mixing room, and then 2 overdub suites upstairs. So been very, very lucky for the last 17 years in LA to continually be working. So
beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And we're going to go back to you. Brad, would you mind sharing a little bit of the work that you do?
I am, my name is Brad Haehnel. I am a music engineer. I started, I hate to say it, some 35 years ago. Back in Toronto, I was at one of the major studios in Toronto called Manta Sound, and there is where I really cut my teeth. I did, it was a 5-room facility. We had a really wonderful, sort of semi-scoring stage, not a scoring stage by comparison to what I, grew into here in Los Angeles, but certainly something. And then because it was such a varied group of studios, I did everything there. So we did film scores, records, we did advertising was our main thing, which was really great to cut our teeth in back in the day as an engineer, because we would do 3 setups a day, which would cover from a jazz band to a rock band to a full orchestra. And that was really, really amazing to be able to do that. It's really a shame we don't get any of that anymore, really, or very little of that. Eventually, of course, I sort of, the studio I was at was closing down. And I, at that time had met, I had known my whole life, Jeff Dana, who's a pretty big composer from Canada. And he was doing a TV series, and I moved to Los Angeles. And from there, I got a job at Ocean Way Studios just to kind of meet and greet people. At that point, that's when I started, doing mostly record work, because I had such a big background in orchestral. I was always called on to do all of the string sessions and the brass dates and all of those sorts of things too. So a lot of stuff was handled there. Soon kind of, just did that for a couple of years, then moved back out on my own, stayed in records, but in film simultaneously the entire time. And, ended up doing, records with, Nelly Furtado. I did all her first 3 records, and a bunch of other things, but then sort of, as pop music changed for me, and because I had the film thing going, I really concentrated on film and just sort of went for that, full tilt. And so really for the past while, it's been full on. I mean, lately, this year alone, it's been Lovecraft Country. We did that, which is an amazing piece of work by Laura Cartman as the composer on that one. The Willoughbys I did. Mark Mothersbaugh is one of my main clients. So I work with him an awful lot. Onward, of course, with the last Pixar movie with Michael and Jeff Dana. Of course, with Michael, I also did Life of Pi with him back in the day, and a bunch of. I've been with Michael since we were sort of started. I think back 1996 was the first film I did with Michael, something like that. I think it goes that far back. We're currently working on some other thing at this point. And, with the changing times, I sort of have been slowly building studios, and I've now settled into a studio called Noise Alchemy, which has been my studio name for a while, but I'm here in Burbank now with a beautiful 5.1 mix room that I just sit in here and mix wonderful music for film and television.
Living the dream. Awesome. Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing. Martina, Albano.
Hello. So I'm from Italy originally, and I came to America in 2011, initially to go to college in Boston. And then after graduating, I did move to LA for a brief period, and I worked with a composer. And at the time, he was working on a lot like movies, but also video games, on scoring them. And initially, what I studied in school was writing and production. So I had a lot of experience arranging, writing for orchestras. But when I got there, there were so many other composers that wanted to participate in the composition part. So I actually kind of found my niche, just creating like libraries of sound. So that was kind of how I started getting more in the technical part of things. So maybe, we would record instrument, or, pitch, like maybe record violin and pitch it down, and creating drones and creating just original sound libraries for a composition. And then because I'm international and I didn't have a green card, I had only 1 year to basically gather enough experience to ask an artist visa. So I decided to actually move to Atlanta because it felt like there was more space for me to come and actually have more, work, especially the year after graduating, to then, show for a visa. So I came to Atlanta, and it's been amazing because I actually decided to just concentrate on mastering. So for the past 5 years, that's all I've been doing. I left all other, composition, and I did, a little bit of production and mixing, but I really decided to just focus on mastering. And that was kind of like the best way I felt like I could contribute to other people's projects. And so I've been doing that mainly for the past 5 years. And aside from that, through mastering, I got really interested in how the brain perceives sound, not just music, but just frequencies in general. And so I am also in school full time because I'm studying that. I'm, my way to studying like neurology and how just sound is picked up by the brain. That's something that it kind of like I got introduced with mastering, but I'm very interested in. And I also, where I have my studio, it's also a music school. So of course now with Corona, we're fully virtual, but we have a very beautiful space. So we also have music lessons, production lessons. And so we also help create a community in Atlanta and help, have like people that are interested in music of really any age, they can come and have lessons. Yes, so that's, and then I also have been like, since 4 years ago, I got on the board for the Recording Academy in Atlanta. And so depending on the year, we have, more or less work, but that we do a lot of advocacy here in Georgia. So that has been a very, great honor to participate to advocacy initiatives, as well as, other community that I'm a part of. And so, yes, that's me.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Really cool. Grecco, my friend.
Well, I'll keep it short because I've done this a couple weeks ago. I'm originally from Brazil. I moved here back in '95 to go to Musicians Institute. After my 1-year course was up, I received a scholarship for another 1.5 years. So I did that, and then I started working in LA. At first, really doing odd jobs like selling Christmas trees and working at an art gallery. And then I started playing at a church in South Central, and then that afforded me to become a musician full time. And I quickly got introduced to the Brazilian music scene in LA at the time. I started doing that. And through connections made in that scene, I ended up working with engineers and producers in the hip hop world and R&B. However, those terms were defined back then. It kind of changed. And then I ended up playing with Sergio Mendes and ended up getting on the tour side of things. And I did that for quite a while. I toured with people like Shakira and Enrique Iglesias and Katie Lang and Gwen Stefani. And then I ended up doing a lot of touring in China and Asia with some pretty big artists over there. And then this year when we, my schedule got cleared up in the course of 3 days, due to COVID, I found myself with something that I had been wanting to do, but never thought I had time, or, was always somewhere else or getting ready for the next project. And that something was time at home. And so I decided to turn my attention and my energy towards studying orchestration and composition, and the Musicians Union was offering a free course with a teacher called Norman Ludwin, and he is part of Michael Giacchino's orchestrating team. And there were a group of 20 of us, and it was funny because within our group we had a keyboard player legendary by the name of Greg Fillinganes, and he was taking the course as well. And I found that, it's like, wow, how amazing is that? So we did an 8-week course, And then I found out about Spitfire and was blown away by their sounds, since I hadn't been paying attention to that side of things. And so I got into that rabbit hole. I'm not sure if it was a good thing or not. But anyway, I'm a big fan, and I use their stuff all the time. And so that's it. That's, now it's, to me, turning, I guess it's the next phase of my career where I focus more on composing and, looking for that kind of work, be it as an assistant to somebody, because I think that's part of the art, part of the paying the dues. And so that hopefully will lead to something else.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for being here again today. And I would like to start with one question, maybe Brad or Jeremy. You both mentioned you worked with artists, right? And then you both worked with film or games or like visual music for visual media. What's the main difference between working with an artist like Nelly Furtado or John Mayer and Marilyn Manson and Onward, or Whiplash, or whatever movies you've worked on, mixing or engineering, mastering?
I'll go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Yeah, this is like, it's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's tough because there are such, for all the artists involved, there's always like, it's their stuff. It's so personal to them. But I've noticed with more of the film folks, it's very much serving the bigger project, serving the bigger picture if it's a film. As with the artists, the bigger picture is them. So there can be a little bit, it's sort of a little shift in ego in terms of what we're working towards. And the thing that kind of sort of blew me away when I first started working with film stuff, because I started off working with bands and doing a lot of like recording bar bands and these guys who was like, I can do this. I just need to do 275 takes of it. And then I'm going to re-record it 3 months from now. And then I'm going to do this 6 months from now. And, these projects stretch out to, my first full scoring date. I'm looking at these players and nobody's looking at the music on the stand. And I'm thinking, oh, they must've got this a few weeks ago and they've been practicing it. And then I say, so how long ago did these people get this music? What are you talking about? The first time they see it is when we say what cue to go to. And then they just start. And it's this magic of this giant room full of people just instantly locking together to the metronome. And there's this like perfect thing that happens. It's like the first take is this, okay, there's a little bit of movement and we figured out some things and let's change this. So for me, I would say the biggest thing is strictly take count. For a film, you get 5-6 takes of a cue, you moving on. With a record, I frequently have had in the past playlists that were in the triple digits easily. So to me, that's sort of where the biggest shift is between them, is the like, because you're serving film composers or filming or going to a picture and serving that picture, and the artists are the art form. So there's just this very difference to me there.
Yeah, for me, Jeremy, for me, it's time. I have to admit, it's one of the reasons that I got out of, because I've been in this business for so very long. I've been able to see a really big change through the years as to how things were done. So when I started in this business, we're on 24-track analog tape machines and all the rest of this stuff. So you have to remember that you needed professionals at that point. You couldn't just have a 24-track machine at home and plug it in, because you don't have the amperage to do that. You don't have a board, you don't have the mics, you don't have the acoustic situation. And of course, you know, luckily I was blessed with being able to start in that world. So you develop a lot of techniques that way. But I think the biggest difference between, you know, and has always been with albums and with when you've got an orchestra is time and money. Okay. So but I've always looked at it this way. So even when I hire a musician, like, you know, Grecco and I have worked together, for example, and even if it's like off the books and kind of just like, yeah, we're just hanging around. I don't know if Grecco ever really noticed this, but my sessions are always about 3 hours long. Always.
Yep.
Even if somebody's just coming in to just kind of play around with us and we're going to have a little bit of fun, it's about 3 hours of concentration, which is, guess what? The session length. Okay. It's so ingrained in me now working with orchestras, because when you have 85 players, you're not messing around. And as Jeremy was saying, not only are those 85 players able to read the music first off, I hit record on the very first take, and I will keep that take and I will use that take. And if the orchestra is really spot on, then, you know, there's been times when I've actually gone ahead and just used that. So
it might be the best take.
It might be the best take. Absolutely. Well, I've always done it. I learned that actually from, I was very lucky to work with some of the great producers too in my lifetime, which is really great. You know, guys like Phil Ramone and people like that. Phil was one of the classic guys that was just like, you know, you're in record from the get-go. You know, I've had some really, you know, and working at Ocean Way, you know, I did some work with some pretty amazing people when I first moved to Los Angeles. And luckily, you know, when I moved here, that was in the early 90s. It was still tape really based. So, and especially at Ocean Way, because Alan Sides, the owner of Ocean Way, he was like, we can do anything on tape that they can do in digital. You know, he was really firm about this, you know? And so we did everything on tape, but I was shocked by how great everyone was. It's funny when you mentioned filling games, because he was actually at one of those, you know, working in those days as one of the top session guys in town. And you know, he was one of the guys that on those sessions, I was just blown away by how great all these guys were. We were doing live recordings and it was just to tape, you know?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of differences that have occurred, as Jeremy was saying. What I find about the biggest difference between records and film is the bottom line is that with records, I don't care whether, what I found and what the reason I got out of records was they would say they need something on Monday, and you would bust your ass to get that on Monday, and no one would look at it till the next Friday. And so I quit all that junk. I'm like going, there's no way I'm dealing with that. Now, if they say they need something Monday morning in film and you don't get it there, you might be fired. It's that simple. That's a pretty distinct difference in my opinion. So
yeah, I want to add that, you know, I had the opportunity to record a tape a few times, and I remember the first time the engineer was like, "You sure you want to punch this in?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure." Okay, you know that you have to play at the same intensity with the same intention. It's not just because I'm going to erase the tape. You can't undo it. You have to mean what you play, you know, and so there's no undo button. And there has to be a level of commitment. And I think because of the time money factor in recording for film, there's no, you know, the clock is on and we have to get this done. So we need to get the best people around, because we don't have the luxury of, you know, doing 10 takes of a thing to get it right. We need to, and plus the process of figuring out what needs to be done has been done by the composer and the committee that seems to be nowadays I wrote something when Jeremy was saying, you know, the artist's way is more personal, whereas the film, it is a bigger picture, pun intended, and it's also, there's a committee that decides things. You know, the composer presents his idea, then the director and the producers will have a bigger say in that thing. It's like, well, yeah, I don't think that worked for whatever reason. Then, you know, we're not going to get into that. But so there's that. And once you get to the studio, it's just to get it done.
Yeah. Hopefully those decisions like that with the producers and directors have been made before you get to the studio, so that when you do get there, you can really focus and get it done. Because, we get, one of the main jobs of a music editor while recording is to work out minutes per hour of recording. Now here in Los Angeles, the musicians get a 10-minute break every hour. So really you're recording for 50 minutes. And we usually try to put in anywhere between, depending on the type of thing these days, between 7 and 12 minutes of music in a 3-hour session. So you can imagine we're trying to do basically a pop song, full pop song, 3 or 4 minutes every hour is the way that you're kind of looking at it,
Right.
There's a lot of music,
Right. And in your experience, how have you had sessions where, sure, first take is great, but what's like the longest that it's, have you had sessions where it's like, oh my God, we're in take 5 and they haven't gotten it yet?
Yes. I've had every experience you could possibly imagine in life, in the studio with musicians. It just, those we could talk tales forever. Generally speaking, that's why, when you hopefully work this stuff out in pre-production, because really it is a matter of how do you get from point A to point B, and get it done as well as you can. So for example, look, budgets are what they are now. And that's the thing. I know that we're going to be talking to a lot of people that are on tight budgets. So you've got a lot of options in the world right now. Okay. So dealing with Los Angeles might be out of the question simply because you can't afford it. Obviously then London is, going to be out of the question, even if it's a non-union, because they're so expensive. So you've got lots of countries in Eastern Europe that have opened up and have been doing things for a long time. I've been very lucky to have been recording pretty much as many of those kinds of recording orchestras around the world as exist at this point, including it's something I like to talk about too. During COVID, I started up with a thing called we call ourselves the Unison Orchestra, which is actually a group of stay-at-home musicians that are working, and we did all of Lovecraft Country that way. So that was 30 players done at home. With sort of me and a bunch of other people working around it and getting it all done. And we were knocking out, I would have to say, about 50 minutes of music a week, which is pretty insane when you consider how much work that is. So all of these things can be done. But it does matter. You do have to sometimes you have to just go with what it is. And then you have to look, I've been in the worst case scenario. We've been in situations where it's like, literally, they're just not going to get it. And we're going to have to move on or change our tactics. Say in Eastern Europe, for example, there were times when their rhythm was so bad that we just basically said, okay, no pizzicatos, no marcatos, no, it's all going to be just long strings. Right. And we'll just sample in the rest of the stuff. So those are the types of production decisions that you have to make instantly, because no matter what, the number of minutes that you have to get done within that 3-hour time frame, that doesn't change.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be, as a producer, really, really, mindful of what you can do and how you can switch the situation in a big hurry when things aren't working.
Right, and you have to make those executive decisions like that.
Exactly.
I have a composer friend who's done a bunch of TV shows. I think he has The Flight Attendant right now is out. His name is Blake Neely, and
I work with Blake a lot.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's a very, very dear friend of mine.
Oh, good. Mine as well. Blake's great. And I remember sending him some stuff, and it had pizzicatos, and he was like, yeah, by the way, if you're ever going to record it with a live orchestra, sometimes I have kept my sequence pizzicatos because it's not going to sound as good if you record it. It doesn't matter where you go.
Well, especially if you have a small orchestra and you have to divisi those pizzicatos, suddenly you've got, so few bodies on it, it doesn't work out,
Yeah. Whereas in the sample, it's huge and full, and you have the whole thing.
They've done everybody all at the same time. So it's a different thing, but yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, I was on mute. Connecting to that thought, I received a few questions before these gathering, and one of them was about that. Like, what's your take, Jeremy and Brad, on are people using a lot of samples? What's your take on using samples, libraries, instead of recording orchestra? Do the work that you guys do include a lot of samples? How does it work?
Why don't you take us first, Jeremy? I got a bunch on this one. So
Sure. Short answer, yes. There's a lot more samples being used. A lot of shows that you see every day on TV are strictly samples, and then there's still some that you see that are regular orchestras. It's kind of, it also, it depends on budget, it depends on time, it depends on everything with these projects. And I've worked on some where I was like, man, these synth strings sound really good, and then you go to the orchestra and you're like, oh yeah, I get it. But it's, even some that I work on that we go do the full orchestra, like Blake, you leave some of those pits strings in there as samples, you leave certain rhythmic things in there as samples, because the computer is so perfect at it that human beings, the reason they sound the way they do is because there's this slight movement between all the people that with MIDI stuff and synth stuff, you don't have that issue of the human movement to it. And sometimes with some of these, a lot of these scores that you're seeing now are okay. You get the final cut of film on Wednesday, and on like Brad said, Monday morning you better have that score mixed and on the dub stage. So it's, right now it's especially hard to say, okay, I'm going to get that on Wednesday, I'm going to write an entire hour-long show of music, which still blows me away that these composers can turn some of this stuff out as fast as they do it. It's mind-blowing. And then, get it on the stage on Saturday, get it mixed on Saturday night, Sunday morning, and out the door. It's, it can be done. It's just, it's a matter of time and money, and whether or not you feel it needs it, or if it's, sound design wise, you think it's a better idea to do it. To do it with the samples to make it a specific sound. So, right. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, to add to that, nothing is worse for an engineer, and I'm sure anybody can agree with this, than saying to me, okay, I need this to sound like a Hans Zimmer score, and we have $50. Okay. And that, unfortunately, I hate to say, is a pretty common issue. So when I'm faced, hopefully you get this sort of dealt with at the beginning of the project, okay, is really where this comes in. If you're a composer, and I've been really blessed to work with some great composers, obviously, and of course I've got Michael Danowitz, who taught me this the most. He's done a lot of really interesting film scores over the years, and with really few players. Look, believe me, an acoustic guitar can sound every bit as big as a 100-piece orchestra if the notes and the playing and what you're trying to do with it is correct. If it works, it works. And I think that people forget that you can make any of these elements work. So when Michael Danny would get a project, I would love it when he would say, okay, I've got X number of dollars. And he'd do the math and he'd go, I can afford 9 musicians. Okay. And then rather than say, I'm going to take 9 musicians and I'm going to augment this giant orchestra sample to try to do that, because that's a pretty common approach where, you'll take, your samples and you'll sample everything. And there's nothing wrong with that approach either. I mean, that's definitely an approach. If you're given the thing that it has to sound like this giant thing, believe me, right now in this current TV show I'm on, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to have to take, the samples, and I'm really going to have to work and massage those samples into a smaller amount of players and try to make that sound like a gigantic score, because that's the order. It's the toughest job for an engineer. And I've been doing this, like I said, a very long time. It's much better to me, and I love the way it sounds when you just go, oh, it's kind of a chamber orchestra size, and you go with that chamber orchestra and you really just let that be the score. and you record that in such a way, and you write in such a way that that is all that the picture needs. And hopefully with the right director and the right producer, you can get away with that kind of behavior. Unfortunately, these days, given, just kind of where the battle is going, everybody's pushing pretty hard to that big, giant orchestral sound. So on a budget, there really is no way around getting into samples. My suggestion for everyone that is a composer, though, to help your engineer out a lot, really learn how to break out all of your samples right away in your writing, so that when it comes time to stemming out to me, you're not sending me like a string patch. I don't want a string patch. I need short strings, long strings. I need marcato strings. I need, every kind of expression, that you're going to be putting into your string samples, and hopefully spend some time. And this is where things like the Spitfire thing comes in, which is great because they are a great library. I actually have a lot of their orchestral percussion because that fails the most in my world is orchestral percussion. And I end up putting my own in and rejigging the orchestral percussion, because either the samples aren't consistent or they're just, and that's the other thing too, be consistent with your samples. Whatever you do, don't be jumping all around and have 20 different timpanis. That's the worst thing you can do. Same thing goes with even like the strings. Try to come up with a palette of strings that sounds really nice and is separated out in a way that when it comes time to delivering, or even for you to mix, but I'm hopefully, I'm trying to include myself back into the equation because quite frankly, it is hard to get, to go through this whole process. But I do think a good mixing engineer can bring a lot to projects, especially when you're combining that then with some real players as well. And I think that combination can work really, really well. It's still never going to sound like a giant blockbuster. It's still not 90 players in a room together. That's a specific sound, but it will come as close as you're going to get when you're doing that. Right now I'm actually putting together a choir of 60 tracks, individual tracks, and trying to make it sound like a legit choir.
Right,
it's
but you don't have
3 days already.
Yeah, you don't have the air moving as being captured by the diaphragm
You're
of the.
muted, I think.
Uh,
I think Martina was going to say
Go
something.
ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Martina.
Well, something that Brett touched on is that I'm on the completely opposite side of the production. So I see all I should have done should have done differently. And definitely like starting with the arrangement and thinking already like the arrangement needs to match the production, because like it was said before, like if you have an arrangement that it's very big and you don't have the budget, then there's no way to succeed in that. And this goes also for other more like less involved arrangements. Sometimes I get songs and maybe the artist wants to have a very big low frequency impact, but just the arrangement doesn't allow for that to happen. And it's there's only so much you can do with engineering. You can't even if there are bass and there is low frequency content, the impact is just a lot of time given by the arrangement. And sometimes I'm a firm believer in like less is more. So today, I was when I was in college, and you open up a computer, you have every sample you could ever imagine. You're like, wow, like I'm gonna use all of this. I have to, why not? And then now from my perspective, I see a lot of composition that are nice, but then you get a lot of like frequency masking because there's so many instruments that are trying to do the exact same thing, or phase issues. And now like that's like, to me, obviously it's like the hardest thing to help with mastering. But you get so many softwares with like stereo wideners and there's like kind of obsession to make the music wide and big, and then you end up having so many more issues that are really going to prevent the audience from enjoying the music and actually perceiving the music as it was intended. So definitely like thinking about this, using, you know, a big arrangement, to me, like the main thing are like frequency overlap of different instruments and how they are arranged, as well as like the processing of like phase. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. I mean, and even with the samples that we're talking about, they all sound great. And sometimes they sound amazing on their own, but then you start to add stuff. You know, you add them to a track that has other elements, and then all of a sudden you have to start, you know, shaving, carving, because, you know, they sound good on their own, but when you put it in context with the rest of the production, it might not fit as well. And the thing that thank you, Brad. I was going to ask you that, you know, how do you work making the samples and real people work? And you just went into that.
That was actually one of the questions was exactly that as well here.
Yeah. And touching on what Martina and Brad talked about, deciding what the palette of instrument and textures are going to be, it's something that I've seen so much now that I've had that as a producer, deciding like, okay, we're going to do this, and having limitations. I believe that that's a positive thing, because you then utilize, or you can utilize, you know, let's say I have these parameters and I'm only going to use 5 instruments or 9 players. I have to make it work. And how can I make it work with 9 players?
Yeah.
What can I create within this palette of colors and textures and sounds, you know? And like, I was watching something that this composer called Carlos Rafael Rivera, the guy who did the Queen's Gambit soundtrack. And he was going through what he used for the soundtrack. And it's like 3 contact instruments.
Yeah.
Straight out of the box. You know, oh, I used this una corda, and then I used this other thing called, I'm not going to remember the second one. And then I used this other piano, the Alicia Keys piano, una corda, and another one. And that was it. That was the basis for his whole thing. And everybody's raving about it. And it's a beautiful score. And again, it's like four instruments.
Yeah.
But it's like, what was I watching yesterday? Something Hans Zimmer was talking yesterday. I clicked on something, and it comes down to, do you have the idea or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because
like
we have,
the best tool is here, right? It's not
Yes.
here, or yeah, it's whatever you're gonna do with.
do you have the tune? Do you have the song, or don't you? Because we have at our hand nowadays every possible sound library, guitar, microphone.
Well,
You
it's
know.
the same thing with plugins for me from engineering.
Yes.
And every gig that I do now, because I used to do that all the time, you know, you would be stuck. You've got a console, you've got this, you've got that. So you've got these parameters that are kind of with you. I consciously set those parameters on every gig now, consciously. So I think about this and I go, okay, what am I going to do with this? Now, sometimes things get a little run away and they get out of hand. Okay, got to admit that's where it goes. But for the most part, you know, I'm going to say, okay, well, let's try, you know, putting this through an entire thing through an SSL console, like they have those plugins now, you know, that can do that and things like that. And so I will start with parameters like that and go, that's what I'm going to use. I'm not going to use a billion other things. I'm going to stick with this as my concept. And I think it helps with creativity, because there's so much to do anyways, creatively, especially from a writing point of view. I mean, and as you're all saying, look, there's 2 things, you know, Sean, anyway, the greatest, you know, thing that you can do for me, from a mixing standpoint, is great orchestration. So if you've got a live orchestra and a great orchestration, my job is done.
Right. That's mixing already.
It's mixing already. And I have done scores where literally, I mean, there's one in particular that I know for sure that I did at Air Studios in London. That was an Adam Agoyan film called Ararat. That film was 5 microphones. The entire film. Okay, except for, you know, there's a couple of overdubs, obviously, a couple of little things, but the orchestral portion of it was 5 microphones, pan to 5 speakers, I believe, and no additional reverb, if I remember correctly.
Right,
So
because you're
that's
there.
Yeah, that's how great you can make something if all of those elements can fit together. So the job of actually mixing and engineering, in theory, should be an easy one, or easier than it has become. One of the problems that I've had with it over the years, and one of the reasons I got out of pop music in general, was because I will never forget when the turnover finally occurred fully to Pro Tools. I went into a studio and I spent a 14-hour day sorting out vocals.
Right.
What am I doing a 14-hour day sorting out vocals?
Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to be done?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, because people just don't make decisions, or weren't making decisions. Now, I just don't do those kinds of gigs anymore. If something comes to me that way, I'm just like, I'm not even touching this. That's insane.
Right.
Just, it's just like with mastering, and I'm sure you get this too, where you get, like a bunch of stems sometimes, and they go, here you go, here's some stems. But then you're kind of a mixer all of a sudden, and you're going, why am I mixing? I'm not getting paid as the mixer. And that suddenly adds hours and hours of time, pre-planning and organization is everything, and limitations. Like I said, if you limit yourself to those instruments or whatever it is that you want to write your music with, I think it's a brilliant concept. I even have to teach that to a lot of the younger composers that just get out of hand with it,
Yeah.
And like I said, it was to my point earlier where I was saying, don't use, a different, string sample every cue. We're trying to have a kind of a
Consistency.
It should have some consistency. Again, much like the mastering job, which is what at the end is to try to take a bunch of different pieces. And with my mastering engineers are my best friend when it comes to albums coming out of the film world, because I really mix against picture all the time. So if a cue is supposed to be super quiet, I mix it super quiet. I don't mix it so that it's punching off the end stops, because it doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be a quiet cue. If it's a loud cue, I might just get it to the top, but that you're still sharing, with all this other sound. So, I'm kind of all over the map a little bit, trying to help the dub engineer as much as I can when I mix. And then when it turns into an album or gets into, some kind of streaming system, I depend on the mastering engineer to, then rebalance that and try to make that more cohesive. That's kind
of. But do you touch the mix again when it's that stage, like promoting on whatever platform, the soundtrack?
Again, this all depends on budget. I'm as conscious as I can be when I'm doing when I'm doing stereo fold downs, but I have been a firm believer of working for the film first, always. I know I've had some trouble even with some of my composers in the past. I hate to say it, because, they all, want to have it sound great everywhere. And I'm sorry, guys, it's just not the way life is. It's everything's a compromise that we do, no matter what it is we do. And it doesn't matter, even if you're mixing just for radio or whatever. Well, I mean, if you're mixing just for radio, that's something, then you can kind of go right at that. But when you're mixing for film, it's a very, very different thing that I'm doing than mixing a piece of music that would be just listened to. As well, too, quite frankly, in a lot of cases, musical cues can be quite dull on their own. So a lot of post-editorial goes on, to get rid of those big, boring, long sections that don't really do anything, that are just carrying you through a scene or whatever, and to turn it into more interesting music. And then the really great composers who have the ability to have live shows, for example, that, hopefully they're able to rewrite their pieces as suites, and then are able to present them as a suite. And then for the really rich, they get to record those and then put out a record that way. But that's pretty rare. I mean, most of the time, I get everything and everything in between. And so hopefully we can find that balance where we can represent everything, again, within the, it's a compromise, no matter what, when you're mixing. Because I'm out in 5.1, God knows now, Netflix has been talking about, they're going to start broadcasting in Atmos and stuff like that. I know that's probably a question that should come up in a second, and we can chat about that in a minute. But, you know, again, it's going to be a compromise. Somewhere along the line, things are not going to sound as good. I mean, luckily I came from a time when mono was supposed to sound good. And so in my brain, I still think about mono, quite frankly.
Well, I was going to say, like, even now, you know, with, you know, you have to work with the limitation, but also understanding what are variables and what are constant. And like mono image still today to most, you know, it's the only constant, because stereo, like, you cannot master for every playback system. It's just impossible.
Right.
So you have to like focus on still on the mono, because, you know, that's the only thing that's going to be consistent. So that's why, like, that's, you know, I do a lot of the processing like in the mono to see how that affects the mono. And if, you know, I tell everybody I work with to just check the mix in mono, because if everything that you want to be there is there in mono, then you know it's going to be there in any system. But I agree with you, it's like all a compromise, because obviously we don't want music to sound mono, but that is the only constant. You know, it's always going to be true no matter what system the music is going to be played on. So, yeah.
Yeah, and plus, you know, we go to these, you know, the best studios in the world with the best players, the most expensive microphones. You go to Abbey Road, you have their mic locker, which is incredible. You have the London Symphony Orchestra, you blah, 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 and so mixed this, and so masters it. And then I watch it on my iPhone with these headphones.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
And those are good.
of course.
Well, hopefully something makes it through. I don't want to go down that path either, where
No,
kids
but I
going,
mean,
well, it's going to come out MP3 anyways.
No. I'm not advocating.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating lowering the bar.
Yeah.
It makes a difference when you have all the elements be the best that they can be. But the compromise is that it's knowing that most people are gonna probably listen to your single on the speakerphone. So make sure that it sounds good there.
And there's a lot of things, like that's where I got interested in the psychoacoustic part of thing, especially with like low frequencies and thinking about like earbuds, like they're just don't have a diaphragm that it's big enough to reproduce a bass. So that's where I got really interested in learning studies about how our brain, even if we don't have that fundamental low frequency that's played, it's crazy. Our brain like perceives higher harmonics and calculates where that lower frequency should be and makes up that lower frequency. Yep. So this to me was mind-blowing, because from a mastering standpoint, you know, I can choose harmonics from the bass and raise those harmonics in little, tastefully, but to create the
impression
illusion that there is a bass without occupying, the bass frequency that, again, to limitation there. A digital file can only have so much information in it. So if you like, I want the bass, but then you just put too much bass, then you're still not gonna.
Well, and back in the vinyl days, the bass frequency it depended on what's the name of the
groove. Well,
the groove,
how wide the groove would go. Yeah, I mean,
and how much music
wasn't
you had
below 50 hertz back in the day.
Yeah,
I mean, there really wasn't. I mean, and none of the stuff actually really reproduced that. I mean, we would only take the tape machines. Like when I worked at Ocean Way, he had gotten Alan had made the heads so that we would actually align them to 50 hertz flat, but most places we'd only go down to 100 hertz flat, and then they'd start to roll off, and by 50, then you're nose diving it, and then there's nothing below 30, zero.
And
now
also
zero.
And also the amount of music you had to put on the sign of the album, because the thicker the grooves, the less minutes of music you have per side.
I just got a thing back, because vinyl, of course, is popular again now. It was really interesting. Somebody contacted me about a vinyl master, and he said the one side is much louder than the other. And I said, what are the lengths of the two sides? And he told me there was a big disparity between the two, the lengths of the side. And I said, what you're going to have to do if you want them to be the same, and they should be the same, so this is a mastering issue as far as I'm concerned, they need to go back and master at the lower level, because obviously they can't make it any louder on the side that was longer. So you're going to have to master the other side to that same level. rather than having one side. And it must have been quite a big difference, because flipping an album, boy, you got to know that, you got to, that it's that big a difference. And it's not a direct A/B comparison. You have to physically flip that thing over. So that was an interesting thing that came up recently in remastering vinyl. It's been a shame because people have forgotten that you've got limitations on that vinyl. Unfortunately, that's why
physical limitations.
It's physical. That's why the EPs were so popular for dance clubs, because you could put more bass on an EP because it would run, shorter, and therefore you can
have larger
cuts, as it were. So
Awesome. Another question that came here. What was your most challenging session work in general? Is there anything that was the one? You don't have to drop names.
Wow.
For all you guys, Martina, Jeremy.
Wow, most challenging.
I can go with the funny thing.
I'll go first then. I actually just today was I started recording this album, and I agreed to do it. And, we were doing a song a day, which I thought was great because I always wanted to do that. The luxury of having a whole afternoon to record one song and figure out the parts. Turned out that it was, these marathon sessions for 7 to 8 hours to finish one song. And I respect the process of trying everything. But to me, what got to me was the lack of committing. 40 takes. My best take was 20 ago. It doesn't. You ask me if this sounds good. Sure. You want to do another take? Sure, I'll do another take since you're asking for it. But there has to me, it has to be the commitment. So today I gave my notice. I was like, hey, thank you so much, but I'm not gonna. I have to cancel our future sessions because
Yeah, I think similarly with me, Grecco, it's always those kinds of sessions when decision making really isn't being made. There was an early on example that I have where we were still on, and it wasn't digital, it was digital tape, but it was still linear. So what we would do is we'd fill up a tape, with the band, and then we do a little 2-track over to another, and then we were Mitsubishi 32 tracks at this point. If this ever gets out to people will know exactly what session I'm talking about. But basically, we would have the band, and then we'd start singing. And I hate to say this, the singer just wasn't very good, and it was really a shame. And unfortunately, I do believe that it was one of those. How do I put this gracefully? One of those situations of the overinflated record budget. If those of you who understand or know what that means, it's
right.
Kind of the way record companies used to really rip off artists in kind of a bad way, and
right.
Yeah, sure still do to some extent today. But there's so much more control. One of the nice things about being able to record at home is that we can do this, but it does carry through, like Grecco was saying, to today. So then we would literally sit there and we would sing. So you've got 2 tracks filled, so there you got 30 blank. We'd sing 29 tracks. Literally, we were punching in line by line for 29 tracks. And then we would comp those 29 tracks down to the last track, listening to every single syllable and word
right.
as we went and comp that down. And then once we got that comp, we'd listen to it and go, it's not quite there yet.
Right.
Is
it not?
Yeah. And there's a point at which, like I said before, and the nice thing about the film industry is you got to come up with a new method in a hurry, because if it's not working, it's not working, and you can't, and those budgets don't exist anymore. This was at a big studio with,
right.
Dealing with, Mitsubishi 32 track tape machine. So, it's expensive recording process. And this poor guy was just getting ripped off, the artist. I just looked at it and I went, this guy is purely getting ripped off. Right. And unfortunately, I've seen that a lot in this business, in a lot of different ways. I was exposed to it early. So when I did move to LA and got into the hip hop world and saw it happening, I was kind of like going, oh, wow, they're just really blatant about it in the hip hop world, and nobody really seemed to mind, actually, which was interesting to me when I sort of inquired about it. Most of the artists were like, well, we're young, we're having fun, If
Right.
it takes, we'll make some money. If it doesn't, oh well, we're still young.
I
was like,
remember, yeah.
cool attitude, you know.
I sorry, I'm gonna go again. I remember one. It's going to be quick, where my call time was 3 a.m. because the producers would get together at 6 p.m. to write the song.
Mm-hmm.
So after I went one day and I was there at 7 p.m. or something like that, and then I didn't get to record till 2 a.m. and I lived like 5-10 minutes away. So for the next one, I said, you know what? You call me when you're done writing the song, and then I'll come by.
Yeah.
And then I'll record guitars, because you guys are having fun and you're writing the song and you're getting through that process of writing and creating. I'm not involved in that. You just want me to play guitar.
Yeah.
If you just want me to play guitar, then call me when you have the song, and then I'll come. And then, we decided that we would work like, I don't know, 2 days out a week for a number of weeks. So it was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I'll come by. I know you guys are going to be here, but I felt for my friend engineer, because he had to be there from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That was the session time.
Yeah, I used to drive. Yeah, when I was doing the hip hop thing, when I was more in the producerial role and I could trust the guys that were in the studio, I would leave. I would leave them. They'd have an idea and they go, "We'd love to try this," and it was an idea that I knew was going to fail just because I've done it enough, but you don't want to tell a new artist that it's going to fail, because you just seem like a dick. So I basically said, "Listen, guys, that sounds great. I'm going to go home. Why don't you guys spend the entire night messing around with that concept and present me something tomorrow, and we'll talk about it." Right. And that's how I kind of handled those situations, because the
Rick Rubin style.
Yeah, it gets tiring. It just is so tiring.
Martina.
Well, that is also one of the reasons why I did mastering, because when I was in school and you could record and at regular times, it was great. But here, when you just get started, you're supposed to start, they tell you start as a, assistant engineer, tracking. And I tried to do tracking, and then, you are sitting there into the night and they're just, just like grooving to the song, maybe saying one line. I was like, I don't have patience for this. I'm just gonna do a favor to myself and everybody else. I just don't, especially like I went to Swiss school. So for us, punctuality was very important. Since elementary, if I was like 2 minutes late, I had to skip the whole class. So, being there and waiting for artists to come 4 hours later, I was like, not for me. So that's kind of why I realized I'm like, with mastering, I can work on music, but I can work on my own time. I don't have, my session don't really go bad unless, there are, horrible songs, but that's hardly the case. So it's like, my sessions now are usually pretty smooth.
Well, it's nice. That's one of the reasons for getting my own studio too at this point, for mixing even, is that it kind of grew out of the budgetary thing. That one time I explained when this was flipping over, at one time a mixer would get, say, let's say they go, okay, $5,000 a mix. All right. So you go, great, $5,000 a mix, but you got to pay for the studio too. So let's say you're in a $1,500 a day studio. Okay, great. So then, wow, if I get this done in a day, I can walk out of here with $3,500, right? And so on that particular day that came in, and then I spent 14 hours sorting through vocals. Well, I'm into overtime at the studio for one, and I'm going to go into the next day. Suddenly you're into 2 days and overtime. Suddenly the studio's costing you $4,000. If you go into 2.5 days, you're screwed. You make zero money. So that was kind of the start of this for me, and studio life was just, it was supposed to be about preparation, and not being in that situation again. But things just kept coming in consistently so bad that I just said, I can't even do pop music anymore unless I'm producing, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because as an engineer, it just got to be unbelievably difficult to deal with. There was just nobody made decisions, period. They just recorded all those hours and hours that you guys are talking about of doing stuff. And there it was on the screen. And you're like, what do I do with this?
Right. Well, I think the lines got blurred where the engineers were all of a sudden making producer decisions.
Right.
You know, where
And
engineers were
not getting the pay or the credit for it, and that was the real frustrating point of it.
Yeah, was it the engineers all of a sudden was expected to sort through all the tracks and make sense of it all.
Yeah.
I even get in mastering track, like sometimes some songs where the artist or the producer is like, okay, I sent you different version with, you know, different level for the lead vocals, you choose. I'm like, no, I'm not the producer here. I'm not like making any executive, you know, I work, like my role is helping you enhancing your track, but I'm not deciding what level your lead vocals is.
Right.
That was actually one of the questions before we go to Jeremy, for Jeremy to share his struggles. What's the limit? Like, do you guys feel like, of course, now you've been working like on this for a few years, you probably have a connection with the producers or whoever hands you the gig, right? Like the mixing or whatever. Do you feel like there is enough room for you guys to step up and say like, dude, I'm not going to work on these like the way it is right now, take it back, fix it. How does it work? Do you feel like there is space for that or not?
I definitely do it. Like, I'll be quick, but I'll definitely do it with the technical side of things. So that's the first, like, sometimes I get tracks even from great mixing engineers or producer, and maybe they have like inner sample distortion or some like things that maybe like they're small, but if I run it through mastering, I'm enhancing everything, and I'm also enhancing those. And I just, even if they're little, like I just don't want to work on something that I'm already starting with a defect, or like I said, like phase, or just there's like some things that I just don't have, and it's not in no one's best interest for me to just like be like, oh no, it's all good. But then for me, when it comes to actually like artistic things or artistic choices in the mix, that's when I usually don't really step in, because one thing that I like about mastering is I work with most different styles of music, and because of that, it is really not my expertise to know for every style, for every intention, what is the perfect balance of the mix. So I really like to take different creative approaches and enhance those, and don't say, okay, well, I think the bass should be louder. I don't really believe in that. So in my mastering process, I don't really alter the mix. So production judgments, it's not something that I give. But the technical is very much so.
Yeah,
Cool.
I agree. Technically, that's kind of the thing. And I appreciate, by the way, mastering engineers who come back to me and say, hey, you got this section is a little bit distorted. And I'll usually come back and go, that's the way it was. I can't really do anything about it. So sorry. But it does. I think that conversation is important. I think that everybody in the process should have some input into what it is, especially with long relationships, especially like me and the composer, because really I work for the composer. I don't really work for, yes, indirectly I work for a studio or whomever's making the movie, but in reality I work for the composer. He's usually the guy who's hiring me. And so what I like to try to do, especially these days now, I like to get involved really early in the process of whether it's be a TV series, whether it be a film, whatever we're doing, and just say, okay, look, I don't want to be caught with this low budget and suddenly we have to work around the clock. That's my biggest thing now at my age. I just don't want to do 12-hour days anymore, period. Yeah. I'm not interested in 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is what I used to do. In fact, with one client, it used to be 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's how he planned the whole thing out. It was 15-hour days, 7 days a week. And I can't do this anymore. I'm glad you love doing it, but I'm not making any more money here, especially on a flat rate. So, you start doing the math on how much you're actually making. And, when you work it out and you're going, oh, especially from a composer, please don't do the math, because you're going to realize you're making like $5 an hour and you're going to be like, why am I doing this for $5 an hour? But to this point I think it's really, really important to understand your budget and understand that we're here to make a living, all of us. And you want to put the best foot forward. And I always, tell like young composers and things like that, look, if you're really smart about it, we can do amazing things with 12 musicians in Los Angeles compared to 60 in Bratislava. Okay. So I try to get in early and then just say, what is it we're trying to do? What's the score? What's the parameters? What does the director expect? What do the producers expect? What is it that we are trying to get to? And then I really do try to come up with a plan for it. One of the only ways I've been able to put myself back into television is to get even more extreme about this and to say, okay, look, how can I help you at the most minimal amount of time? So I'm doing TV shows. I do DC Comics Supergirl series, not the cartoon version of it. And I also do Mira Royal Detective for another composer. And these are short little animated 11-minute bits. Okay, so each of these are in 11-minute bits. And so what I did was I sat with them, how they're composing, how they're planning to put it together. And I built basically a Pro Tool session where they can land everything. And it's all there. They've built it, or one of their assistants has built it. And I've got it so that they understand how I want it consistently. It comes to me and I spend no more than 3 hours mixing that. And so I charge a minimal fee. And so suddenly they can afford a top-notch film mixer again and get their stuff presented without it being too crazy, nothing, over the top. And I think that's really where I think the new world has come in. Find, that I do think that even though we're all, again, cloistered in our home and it feels like we're all alone sometimes, it's even worse given COVID, but there are professionals out there. And I think I love this whole thing, by the way, guys, because this is a great way for people to understand that there are professionals out there who want to help, but you just have to sit down and talk with them and just go, hey, this is what I want to do. How do we do that? And I can afford to have you do something.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we're all workers, right? We're all working and that's it. Like, forget some people create these barriers, and because this person worked with such and such, I'm not going to call, I'm not going to send a text or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a great input. I just want to go back to Jeremy really quick. First, if there's any session or any work that you've done that you felt like it was very challenging. And second one, how is it the process right now at Sony for the work that you do? Do you get do you get to be involved in some of the creative process? How does it work in general?
It's funny. I was actually thinking about sort of nightmare stories, and two of mine came at the same studio, and not a studio I worked at, just studios I randomly ended up at. And one of them was a hip hop studio that I think I did 19 and a half hours straight. The guy had an entourage of like 25 people in the back that were just constantly kept the control room filled with smoke and constantly eating. Never offered me anything. So for that 19 hours, I didn't eat. I was just getting, the hustle the whole time. And at one point I was like, hey guys, I really need to run to the bathroom. And they're like, we're not paying you to pee, dog. And I was like, then don't pay me for the next 5 minutes. I gotta go. And it was just like, they just whipped me to death on that one. And then I had at that same studio, ironically, about 2 years later, I had the polar opposite of that. We're going to start at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Drummer will be there at 10:30. Have everything ready. We're going to start recording by 11:30 at the latest. Great. I show up at 10 a.m. And I have very little contact with the actual artists. I'm working through their producer and their management. And so I have very little contact with them. Nobody shows up. I'm like, okay, what's going on? 9:45 that night. I'm like, I guess I'm going to go ahead and head home, guys. And then they pull into the studio. And then they're like, yo, we need to hurry. We have to be out of here in like 20. The drummer has to be out of here in like 20. Can you get drums done for these 8 songs in 20 minutes? I don't think we can get them in the studio in 20 minutes. Well, make it go. Just make it happen. Just fix it. We'll just have him record one verse and one chorus, and you just loop the rest. Yeah, this is going to turn out great, guys. This is going to be amazing. Thanks. So it's funny that there was both of those ended up being in the same room. I've had a few others. I had a other artist who will remain nameless, but stood nose to nose with me. He had me do something a very specific way for engineering for this for months and months. He said, I want it this specific way. Don't change it. Don't alter it. If I come in and I hear it any different, I'm going to just lose it. Okay, fine. We'll do it your way. This is the way we're doing it. And then about 4 months later, he comes in and he hears it. And he goes, why are you doing it this way? Make it another way. And it's like, well, you made me make it this way. And then he stood in my face for the next 45 minutes and told me that he was going to end my career and that I'll never work in this business again. And I've messed with the wrong guy. And I was like, I just did what you asked. You were so specific on what you wanted. And so, I've seen the gamut. That's why I'm now working in film. That was part of the big thing is I didn't see that as much. I didn't, people respect your time. People respect, I mean, there's, of course.
Deadlines mean a lot, man. Deadlines mean a lot. Absolutely.
And so you would see that more. And it was like, oh, they respect my time. Well, they also respect their budget. They also respect that this has got to get done. This is on a deadline. It's got to happen. And so you would see that. I mean, and it was such a stark thing that I was like, I'll never do a record again if I can help it. Every once in a while, I still do records, mostly with artists that I know really well now, because they let me have a little bit of creative input. Like I started in music playing bass. I'm not a great bass player. I played in terrible bands. I've played on a few tracks and stuff, but I wanted to be able to be part of the music, and I just didn't have the dexterity, but I had the ear for some of this. So that's why I still like to do the record stuff. But the film stuff, especially the film stuff, is so regimented and it's locked and loaded. And that's, one of my favorite things now with working for Sony is, we're doing a lot of voiceover. These actors come in, they're ready to go. They know their part. We have them for X amount of hours. We work with them for X amount of hours. Okay, if we stop at 6 o'clock, if their time's at 6 o'clock, at 5:59, we're doing our last line and you're out the door at 6. There's no room for, all right, so I know we've done this 47 takes, but can we get another 50 that are just like it? That was one of my least favorite things when I was, for a while, doing, I was doing a lot of VO for advertising. And you would have 45 people on the call, another 12 people in the room. I wasn't sure what any of them ever did, but they always wanted to have a say-so. So you would record 75 takes of this 30-second spot. And then after you do that 75 takes of it, they go, let's talk about it. And they all mumble to themselves. And the actor pulls me aside and goes, is it me? Am I doing something wrong? No, it's not you. Everybody just wants their opinion. And then we use take 2 for the entire commercial. So it was, that was when I was like, I want to get in something a little more regimented, more tight. And that's when film sort of started being, I get to do everything, the text super high, especially when you start adding 5.1 and Atmos and getting bigger, and the tech keeps moving forward. The records are still stereo. I mean, there's surround records and stuff, but the basis of records is they're still stereo, and the presentation is still the same.
Well, to that, Jeremy, too, I think the important thing there is that I always like to, if there's anybody out here who's just in the songwriting world or just in the pop producing world or anything like that, they have to understand that they do have to get out of their mindset of not getting things done and delivered on time for film. I've seen it. My wife is a muckety muck over at, she was Fox, now Disney Fox, whatever that is called now. Anyways, you won't get the gig. If you get ordered up, you got to remember it's going to go out to 10 pop producers, for example. So they got a song. They go, okay, 10 pop producers, here you go. Whoever gets that back on time, or the 2 or 3 that get back on time, they'll be considered. The rest of them, they're off the list, and that's just kind of the way it goes. And I've seen this with absolutely the cream of the crop, like artists, that they just go, nope, you didn't make it on time. we can't put you in the film. Simple as that. So
Right.
important stuff there.
Jeremy made me remember a session I think I did with you, Brad. We're not going to go into names, but it was for a different country, and we had guys on Skype, and we were singing this commercial. And I think I had recommended. I think Shanti was the singer in the.
That's right. I remember this now.
And then we kept doing takes and takes and takes and takes, and nobody said good. That was good. Okay, one more.
Yeah.
One more. What?
That was
what
a very interesting session. I do remember that. Yeah.
What do you want different? Do you want anything different? And sometimes they just need to. People are not used to the fact that sometimes you're going to get the best take within the first 5 or 3. Absolutely. And they need to justify their spending.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you need to play that game of like, all right, we're going to be here for an hour, but really the first 10 minutes is where it's going to happen.
Yeah, there's always going to be that one thing. You'd find it more in advertising, which that was an advertising thing, because it's just a single spot. So it's like you've got one single cue. What I always find that happens usually on most films that I work on, and you're in recording the orchestra, is the director's gonna get on to one thing, like one in particular thing. And if it's only one thing, that's fantastic, because then you just have to service that moment, and you have to
exactly.
Okay, I've got to service this moment. There's going to be 6 other producers. I think on that one, I think there was a room full of back thing, because we're on Skype. We couldn't see how many people were actually physically there. But I think there was an awful lot of, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? And then everybody had to have input.
Like Jeremy said, everybody had to say so.
Exactly. And then once everybody feels like they've been heard and they've somehow gotten what they need, then it's okay. So it is a game of, that's when patience really, really, really comes in. You know, and just a note on the composer side of things too, from that angle as well. It's like, don't be precious about anything in this business, period. I mean, you don't know how many times people have come to me and says, Brad, the mix just isn't working. And back in the old days, I was very, I wasn't trying to be like crazy about it, but I would literally just sometimes pull all the faders down, like literally go across the entire desk and pull all the faders down and go, okay, it's not working. Let's take a different approach. And then we'd hit it again. And I think that you know, we can all be our own worst enemies if we get too wrapped around one specific ideal, especially in film, because you're going to be, I mean, I'll throw this one out because it turned out to be an amazing thing, and we all knew it was an amazing thing. But on Life of Pi, Ang Lee is a very difficult director that way. I mean, he really wants what he wants, and he's not the greatest at explaining precisely what he wants. But when he hears it, and once he's made his decision, he'll never change his mind. But I'm pretty sure Michael said something. He believes he wrote that entire score like over 20 times from top to bottom, taking completely different angles on the whole thing. And that's working with somebody he's worked with a lot. So you have to be, as much as we say it's great to work in the film industry because there are specific deadlines, you also are going to be up against the fact that people are just going to throw out everything you just spent the past week doing, and you're going to have to start from square one again, and you don't have any more time. And so suddenly you're like, okay, I had a week. Now I've got a day. What do I do now? But that's the reality of that kind of collaborative work. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I do love is everybody's very straightforward. It's not, you sort of take emotion out of it. You're working for the final product. And the first time it happens, I'm not gonna lie, the first time someone was like, the mix isn't working, oh, it hurts so bad, because you're like, you're like this kid who came home with this drawing and you're like, Mom, Dad, look at this, I made this amazing drawing. They go, it sucks. It hurts so bad. But then you realize, especially once you rework it and you see it, against the picture, and you go, yeah,
you're absolutely right.
You were right.
Yeah,
all the time.
Or it's like, my thing is, it's like, I mean, look, I'm going to tell you this. I admit this openly. I'm doing this like a very long time, but presentation day is always nerve wracking. Always. I don't think that ever changes. You know, I think, especially for a composer, engineer, anybody who's doing anything, if you're presenting any art at all, and you have to present that to a client, it's always, that first playback is always so scary.
And long. It
And
takes
long.
a long time to get through the song.
Yep.
Exactly.
That song feels like a lifetime.
Yeah.
Jeremy mentioned very briefly, do you usually mix without looking at the picture, or both happen, like mixing, looking
Both
at the
happen. And eventually you're throwing the dialogue in there to, like Brad said, mix against the picture. The biggest compliment a dub mixer can really pay you, in my opinion, is, oh my God, I didn't have to touch your stuff at all. I just dropped it in and it works. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's what you want. You want to help
Exactly
the next, you want to help the next step.
Yeah.
Not have to go,
because that step's way more expensive than our step. Quite
Yep.
frankly, the dub mixing is, on a big dub stage, it's expensive stuff, so you don't want to be late, never be late. I don't care what anybody says, never be late. That's the worst thing you can do. I've seen that question asked on the internet a couple of times, and I know I've answered it, where people have said, if it came to, really perfecting the music or delivering on time, I said, if you don't deliver on time, you may never get a gig again. And honest to God, I hate to say this, and I know, because we all struggle with this. Look, I'm the same way. That last 10%, no one can hear. No one except us. And even and sometimes I feel like I'm messing with some kind of weird shit in my head, and that I'm that I'm not even right. It's not even real.
I had an artist today that I was just mixing for, who was so, like, there's this one snare hit that's like a quarter dB too loud, and you're like, no one's ever going to hear that. That's if that is what's going to stop people from buying your album, then we think
you're doing everything wrong.
Yeah, well, that was my thing with mixing back in the day too, and why I said pulling the faders down, because I can remember distinctly, people doing that, where they'd go in and they'd be mixing for weeks, on a pop song, and people still do that, I'm sure, where they, or whatever. I mean, I just don't do that. But my thought was always, if the mix isn't working, it's not going to be whether or not I ride that vocal fader for another 20 hours. It's going to be, something's not right about the general mix. So that's why I say I pull all the faders down, and I do that in Pro Tools sometimes too. I'll just pull everything down if I've got it organized enough, and I'll just start mixing again, because sometimes you just take the wrong approach. Sometimes you just turn up the wrong thing too loud, and suddenly you're trying to build around that, and it's just not the right balance.
Yeah.
So I think you need to be brave enough to be able to do that, and look at a blank page again if you're a writer, and go, okay, they don't like that, because then what are you going to do? I've seen a lot of composers that rework, and I'm even talking big composers that end up trying to rework what they began, and it's never going to work, because clearly, I've sat in rooms where clearly the director just does not like what's going on. You just get that sense that there's just, doesn't matter what you do to this particular piece of music, he's never going to like this particular piece of music. So maybe we should chuck that piece of music and start with a blank page again, because I think that'll probably work better for him, because they don't hear those little tiny differences, even melodic differences. Sometimes they don't even hear. It's like,
it's a feeling. It's whether they feel it or not feel it. That they're connected in a different way. It's not, obviously they're connected audio wise, but it's more visceral. It's more this produces the feeling that I want.
Exactly.
Versus it doesn't. Of course, the oral part has a big component, but it's not, it's not the only component.
Yeah, it's tough. I do a lot of animated features, and that's, because as Mark Mothersbaugh always says, it's heavy lifting when you're doing that, because basically you are the emotional content, the music.
Right. Yeah.
And so it is really, really, really tricky. Just finished a film recently where, it was a really tough directive, where they didn't want too much emotional input, but at the same time, it's a very emotional scene. And unless the music is playing to that, it's just cartoon drawings on the screen. You know what I mean? It's not, there's not a thing there to connect that they're sad or happy or whatever. You know, you've got to kind of play to that. So it's got to be a little bit more literal.
Yeah. And then there's also the thing that, you know, I remember our friend Blake, again, he had a thing in his studio, which was a rack unit that all the knobs had palindromes, right? And it was just connected nowhere.
To nothing.
But sometimes the producer knob or producer fader, and sometimes the producer or the director or whoever's in charge needs that control, needs to have final say because it's their baby. So they need to feel good about it. Like, and you know, and I do that as an artist myself.
Push those buttons right there.
I need 0.5 dB. In my head, I hear it.
Yeah.
I had one that it was the first time I realized just the power of the mental portion of it. I was working with an engineer and we were mixing for a rock record, and he sent off the mix and he sent it to the whole band and sent it to the producer and everybody. And then he got notes back, and the bass player, the bass player was needs to come up. Drummer was the drums need to come up. The guitarist was the guitars need to come up. The vocalist, not surprisingly, the vocals need to come up. You know, it was the typical thing. And he goes, I can't, do me a favor. Take the mix that we sent them, rename it V2, and send it back to him. And I was like, are you sure about this? He goes, just trust me. We sent it back, and everybody was like, see, that's all you had to do. It's perfect. It's like those changes were made perfectly. And it's like, well, all we did was I put a V2 at the end of the file name.
Yeah.
I learned that one working in advertising for an agency, again, overseas. And unless I put final or final mix on the file that I sent,
It wasn't final.
It wasn't final. I would get revisions. And the guy who was mixing told me, he's like, listen, when you think you're done, then send it over and say final. And that was the thing. Once this is final, oh, okay. That meant that all their needs had been met, and I addressed every note that they sent and every revision. You know, okay, this is the final one. But until I did that, it was not done.
Absolutely.
That's awesome, guys. Well, we are approaching the end. It's been a great afternoon for us here in LA. There are a couple more questions really quick before we finish this. One is from Marco Fazio. Jeremy knows Marco. Apple just released their new featured spatial audio that's supposed to emulate some kind of surround sounds with your AirPods and AirPods Max. Since Apple is such a big player and have the force of moving an entire industry forward, do you think that this could be a game changer in terms of how the audience can experience movies and things like that? How does these affect engineering?
Well, I'll go on this one because we haven't actually talked about this a little bit. It's going to come back to the usual thing. There's going to be a lot of this experimentation over the next little while, okay? And it's not going to be, none of them are going to be a game changer, okay? So I am a big believer in Atmos mixing. I think Atmos films that are done properly and put into a proper theater that is properly aligned, and I keep saying the word properly because there's a lot of elements that have to go into making these things work right. There are a lot of consumer grade Atmos systems that are coming. Hopefully they'll be pretty cool, you know? But the bottom line is you still have to remember that the mix has to be, first off, dialogue has to be heard first and foremost. The story has to be told first and foremost. So I don't really care about any of this stuff if the story isn't being told. No matter how I look at my mixing, you know, if you're in most studios when you go to theaters, I still equate it to theaters, even though maybe theaters aren't going to last much longer and it's going to be some other playback system at home. Most of the weight is still forward, okay? So your main LCR setup is still going to be the majority of your weight. Then it works out into your surrounds and however much you have. I love the concept of spatial audio. I love the concept of three-dimensional mixing. And in fact, this room will be Atmos at one point. There is no question in my mind. Am I going to mix Atmos movies? Probably for music, probably not. Okay. And people are out there going, why wouldn't you mix your music? And I know mixers that really believe in mixing first generation Atmos for their music. The problem that I have with it is you have to understand is what is it bringing to the palette musically? Okay. Is it just going to be something that's going to be engulfing people and that's pretty cool? Well, guess what? You can kind of do that with your 5.1 mix pretty easily on the dub stage with a good dub mixer. My biggest point to modern movie making is that I like to give a lot of stems. So when I mix pretty much minimally, I'm giving anywhere between 8 and 16 stems, meaning bass, drums, strings, all separate. The reason that I'm doing that is because if I have everything and I just send them one mix as a 5.1 mix, actually it's kind of twofold. One is, if that's all they have, then if it's getting in the way of dialogue, then they take your whole mix and they pull it down. Okay. And you hope that they'll pull it back up again. Maybe they don't. Maybe, their dialogue's first. So you got to remember your turn in line, and dialogue is definitely king when it comes to film mixing, dub mixing. So I like to have that all separated out as well in modern filmmaking, especially when it comes to animated features and almost anything now. Really, films are never done. They keep editing through the entire process. So most of the time, the music's going to have to be edited like crazy. So if you marry everything together, suddenly you're kind of screwed. The music editor is going to have to be like really butchering your music. But
less flexibility.
Yes, it's maximum flexibility. So you've got to give them all the stems so that the poor music editor stands a chance at letting your music actually survive in the film. And then there's always that whoop, 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 or ding, 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 or sound that the director goes, what the fuck is that? I hate that sound. That sound's just got to go. I've gotten really good about being allergic to those sounds, just like directors are. So I always make sure that whatever that sound is on its own stem. So that when the director starts freaking out about, I've never heard that before, or what is that thing? They can just go, oh, well, we'll just turn it off then. And, everything's great now, Right. So it is giving the flexibility to that. And remembering in music, coming back to this whole thing about when this is why I'm not a dub mixer, by the way. Those guys have my blessing because they take the brunt of it all, because most of the time, it's the first time a lot of the producers have ever heard the music or ever even seen the picture is at the dub. And so they show up at the final dub, the final bit, and then suddenly they're hearing everything for the first time put together, and everybody's going to have an input. Everybody's going to say something. So the poor dub mixer's got to be the guy who's got to sit there and give everybody what they want and turn those invisible knobs sometimes to not make it sound like crap and make it actually sound good, but at the same time, give everybody, the lip service that they need in the room. I could never do that job. I have to say, it's just, I like being a music mixer. It kind of keeps me, I know what my parameters are, and I kind of can sit in that. Dub mixers, they are worth every dime that they get paid because, man, they get it at the end. They really do. I've seen some crazy stuff go on there. But at any rate, that's part of the reason why I give so many stems. Now, if you're 5.1 as your base that you're sending, or 7.1, or let's go out to Atmos, and you've got, and it depends on how you're doing Atmos. I don't want to get technical about how all these things work, but let's just say 5.1, which is my general delivery method. First off, if I'm sending 16 stems, I'm not going to send 16 times 6 tracks. Okay, whatever that works out to. I've never done that. I won't go that high. Some guys do that. They're insane because it's just too many tracks at that point. So I subdivide everything down to LCRs, stereos, 5.1s, quads, all depending on what is necessary and what the actual format is the release in. So if the release is in Atmos, for example, if you do everything in 7.1 or 5.1, they're going to have to break those open or subdivide them out. Actually, there's a lot of great software for that now, but in order to jig it and remove things around the room and move things to where you want. I usually have a long conversation with my dub mixer about where I want things to go and how I want them to go. So, you know, but again, I'm still thinking about overall the big thing, a real great Atmos delivery system. Okay. Can you put that in earbuds? I don't think so. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like dealing with the psychoacoustics of trying to figure out how to get all that bass and how to get all that stuff into your head is really interesting to me. I just don't think it's ever going to really take away from a properly set up live environment that really has been set up for that. And that's why I'm hoping cinema will continue for a little while. Anyway, I hope.
How about you, Jeremy?
You know, it's interesting time right now with all of it because there is so much trying to figure out. Like I just recently did a demo for an HRTF system that basically does surround sound, Atmos sound with just stereo headphones. And it was impressive. It was so impressive. Like there was a point where I'm looking forward like this, but there's something coming up behind me and I could feel it coming up from behind me. I shouldn't be able to hear that in a pair of headphones. Like that should take a surround sound speaker to happen. I could hear stuff dropping in from above me. I shouldn't be able to hear that. It's just stereo. My brain's still trying to wrap around it a little bit, like how the math and mechanics behind it. And it's so interesting. And I think we're going to see a lot of strides forward with it. And, you know, definitely you're starting to see it with the 3D audio stuff. You know, Microsoft Xbox just came out with their new one and they were saying 3D audio. PlayStation 5 just came out, 3D audio. It's all being part of it. So when when your character turns around, the world turns around with them. And it's really cool. And it's going to keep getting better. But do I think that's going to be the end all be all for everybody and everybody's experience? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's, when 3D movies, when they first came out, when
Yeah, I was going to say that.
This is the thing. This is going to be the last movie I saw in 3D at the theater was Avatar. After that, I was like, I'm okay. I get it. Like, everything else since then has been kind of like, So when you have something on that high of a level and then you try and dumb it down, you lose a lot of the translation to it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's basically the industry creating new sources of, revenue, basically creating new gadgets and there's these, I forgot the name of the music startup. They're creating these wearable, it's kind of a suit thing that goes under your t-shirt or something like that, that will generate the bass frequencies directly into your body while, so
it's a little frightening, but that's okay.
Martina, how about from the psychoacoustic side of things?
I was gonna say, like, I think sonic perspective is not just like, we're not just talking about the hearing mechanism, but it's really your whole body. That's why, like, even to me, like, even listen to music, like mastering with like long sleeves, so like surely, like, you feel like you perceive sound differently, not just like like obviously like low frequency in your chest, but also really high frequencies that are higher than what we could hear with the hearing mechanism. We still perceive them with like like little like hairs we have on our on our body and everything. Like it just vibrates to frequencies, and so whether it's Atmos or whether it's even stereo, like definitely hearing through headphones is super limiting because you're just relying on the hearing mechanism and not of your whole experience. And I think to also, if you want to go in detail from a experience, not just of the music but of the space you're in. And if we live here a song or a movie in one room, we're going to have one experience, and in another room another experience, and this all depends on on your whole body, not just on on hearing it. Even though yes, like I also experienced something similar of just through headphones it was on something that was coming from behind and up, and you're like, how do they do it? But you're still missing like your full immersion of your body into it.
Martina, really cool question here for you too, actually. If you have any texts or books to recommend, about that, about how humans perceive sound?
Yes. So there's a book. It's called. I can link it in.
You can type in the comments here.
Yeah.
So Thando can, and I'm personally interested as well.
Yeah,
And
me
there's
too.
also Dario, one question for you. How often do you get to do separate stems mastering?
For me.
Yeah.
I don't really do stem mastering. I just, I just ask for, in music, I understand maybe in movies it's different, but just in music, I just want them to have a good idea on where they want every instrument to go, what has priorities, and maybe I would talk an artist through, sometimes they want more background, sometimes they're are in doubt, and I'm happy to talk about what are pros and cons about different decision, but I'm just not also with mastering, it's a set fee per song. So I'm not a producer. Don't get credit as a producer. I don't get paid as a producer. So I'm happy to coach, but at the end of the day, I do not do stem mastering. I just like to get a final
Brad,
idea.
you're gonna say something, Brad.
Yeah, that's even for me when I'm sending. I don't send the stems to the mastering. Obviously, But what I'll often do is because I have stems so wide. What's really nice about stemming so wide for the album version and putting it into stereo, it allows me a lot more control when I'm doing my fold down. So I don't have to fold down everything by the same ratio. So in other words, I don't have to just go, okay, well the center has to come down 3 dB and the surround 6 dB and so on and so forth. I can take each and every individual stem now and treat it differently and monitor that in stereo. And then I give, so hopefully I usually have the time to do that, but I would never give stems to a mastering engineer. That's not the gig. I want them to do that final touch. I want them to do what their job is to make it sound as cohesive as possible for an album, even though, well, for scoring, it's nicer because you hope some people put on an album and listen to it from top to bottom occasionally.
I do.
Yeah, I do too.
I linked in this is it's a brick. It's a lot of information in this book, but I linked it. Why You Hear What You Hear by Eric Heller. I think that's a good one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, guys. It's been a great chat, great gathering. I really, really, really appreciate you guys, Martina, Brad, Grecco, Jeremy. Thank you so much for being here today, for giving your time. Thank you guys for watching these right now, and for those who will watch these later. If you guys want to close with something, something you guys felt like you didn't say, you wanted to mention, let's do that now. And then I'll share your guys' Instagrams, handles, and things like that for people to follow you and eventually connect. So Martina, thank you again. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I just really enjoyed the conversation. I think so much good points were covered. So thank you all for this conversation.
Awesome. Brad?
No, thanks for inviting me to this. It was I love doing these things, by the way. I really do enjoy passing on the knowledge. I think it's for those of us who've moved to Los Angeles from other places, I think it's something that I've missed is kind of the mentorship system that I was raised on, and in Canada, and you see, in London and places like that, you don't see it as well established here in Los Angeles, and I think it's a bit unfortunate. So I do think this is a great way to hopefully help others get through. And again, I depend on young, new composers to be my future clients. So I will help in any way I can. So I tell this to people anytime, please do contact me and and see what we can do,
Beautiful. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is actually very very inspiring to hear that. I think it's cool. One thing that I also usually ask people, like, what is the thing that inspired you to, to do this stuff that you do, to wake up in the morning and do music. Maybe we can take it back and go with that. Like, Martina, is there anything that you feel like that really touches you to do what you do? It doesn't have to be music,
Yeah, or just learning. Like, I love learning new information, and part of me going into school was that I just like, thinking about the future. I just want to have enough information to just always be happy and be inspired to, wake up one day and be like, okay, I'm interested in this. Let me learn this. And a lot of what I have to do in school is a lot of, chemistry, organic chemistry, something that has nothing to do with music, but, it's required as, part of like knowing this. And like, I just love to really find something that interests me in everything I do and really make it a point to like, find common threads. That's why like what brought me from like, writing for orchestra to mastering, like I always thought, okay, well, it's the same, because in orchestra, you hear the whole sound together as one voice. And that's the same thing I'm doing in mastering. So just finding this like pattern and common thread and finding a way to like whatever you have to do in life in, in day to find something inspiring. Yes, that to me is like the main goal.
You're a scientist, right?
I like it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Jeremy.
I just want to say thanks for having me. This is super cool. And like Brad said, I was very lucky because I did move to LA to start this, but I ended up at a studio that was, and you don't know these things when you don't realize this when you're in the middle of it. But I landed at a studio, it's called Signet Sound, and it was.
Did I ever meet you back then, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to go in it. Yep. And I was hoping you weren't like one of my sessions wasn't going to be your horror story.
No. Everything I've worked with you, even over at Firehouse when we did Good Dinosaur.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to go. I'm now remembering you were on Good Dinosaur. Yeah.
Yep. So, I've been crazy fortunate that the people around me have been. They've taken me under their wing. Like, I mean, like I said, I didn't know it at the time, but Signet was this like magical unicorn place that was just like the best of the best in this business, all coming together with the best of the best rooms, and that our techs were incredible, and everything was just this like perfect thing. Like, very rare. Oh, I was so spoiled. I had no idea. When I was there, I was like, oh man, I just have to go work. You just start to get in this, like, it's still, and then I realized after it was over, like, oh my God, I hit the golden goose when I landed there, because most of the engineers that work there, I could go, hey, can you show me some stuff? And they go, of course, come in the room when you're done working. Come in after the session. One of our assistant engineers, who was incredible guy, we had this thing where I would walk around to the Trader Joe's that was right behind us and get one chocolate stout for each of us. And we would sit after the session would end, and he would explain why we're doing this for this tracking data, why we're doing this for this mix date, and why this engineer does this and why this engineer does that. I had no idea that was the best education I was ever going to get. And I was, still to this day, like, just right now, when people find out I was at Signet, they're like, oh, you went to Signet? Nah, things are going to be fine when we work together. Like, I had no idea that image was being portrayed from that studio when I was there. And so I always try and, like, anytime I can, impart any knowledge that anybody wants to listen to. Sometimes I feel like I'm like, I shouldn't be saying this stuff. These people are, but I've been crazy fortunate, and now I like sharing it. And most of the jobs that I get are from, hey, I know this person who knows this person, or hey, do you have time to do this, or do you have time? So and so needs this, and and it is the community that does that. Without that community,
Signet was actually a really great community. You guys had a really good thing going over there.
It was so special, and so I try and push that everywhere I go a little bit, and I realize, oh yeah, most places aren't like that. Most rooms in LA are not so forthcoming with information. They're not. We
won't go into why though sometimes.
And this is really cool that you mentioned, you brought it up again, like the power of community. And this is also something that we didn't talk about this, but I think it's really, let's not end this session right now. what is the importance of networking? Isn't it everything, right?
Yeah.
All the work that we get from, how do you, like Jeremy just touched a little bit on it, like you were part of this incredible community. You were, maybe at the time you didn't perceive a lot of value, but now you do. And some of the work that you get today is from this community that was formed. Please.
Yep. I mean, it's a very, very, very small industry, globally speaking. Like you,
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
I work with, the same people now that I worked with when I moved out here in 2001. Like it's amazing to me that the same people keep coming back into my life. The guy who gave me my first job at a studio gave me my job at Firehouse because he had went from Signet to Firehouse. And then he called, we were on the phone one day and he goes, "Man, you should come over and work with us. It sounds like you're ready to go back into film stuff." I am. "Oh, well, come over." And then he brought me on. And then, and then once Firehouse closed, all the clients that I started working with when I started freelancing right after there were Firehouse clients, Signet clients. They were the same. It was the same community, and it's all this, and then they introduced me to so-and-so, Greg Hayes, who's a very good friend of mine. I met him at Signet. I worked with him at Paramount. I worked with him as an independent. He introduced me to Blake Neely. This community just keeps getting spread around. And what happens is if you work with people that you really enjoy working with, the other people that they tend to work with are also people that you tend to work with, you enjoy working with. Yeah. And that makes the whole process so much better. It's really, really all about community.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And sometimes it's not just like the work that you get directly from the community, because for example, for me, when I moved to Atlanta, the community that I was inserted in, they already had, every mixing engineer had their mastering engineer, and they were, good relation. So it wasn't much about me, like getting in the way, but like what I got from a good community is invaluable. Like it's like you mentioned mentorship, but it's even like life, like there's so much more that you get from a community, and not just a job or one opportunity. So
it's gotten harder, I think, these days, though. I think that's one of the things, especially for someone like me that's kind of locked in my own little world. Mark Mothersbaugh said it very eloquently years ago to me. He says, there's a lot of us that just have parallel careers in this world, and our lines never cross. And it's really a shame that sometimes our lines never cross, because we just get for me, I can get so busy that I don't even come up for air for like 9-10 months at a time. And then suddenly, I mean, I'm blessed and I'm lucky that I had one of those years this year in particular. And it is only, towards the end of the year that things started slowing down again. But I have a very busy top of the year again. But we've been developing this online community like this, which I think is really fascinating, because, hopefully today we'll all talk and do more work and do things together. And I think that's really amazing, because I think the online thing is actually becoming more important, because the Signet thing doesn't really exist anymore either. You know what I mean? Those types of studios, that are multi-room, multi-function, and all the rest of that stuff, there's not that many left. And those that do exist are, it's not quite the same as it used to be. It just isn't like working at Oceanway. When I was at Oceanway, he had 9 rooms, and so you met a lot of people with 9 rooms going all the time, and had a lot of different clienteles come through quickly. But nowadays, it's just not the same thing. So it's very specialized, and people are renting the big rooms unless you're really top shelf composers or songwriters or whatever. You're not booking a month into Oceanway or Cello or whatever it is called now, East West or United, or because they have all busted up into a bunch of pieces now. And then a lot went away. Signet's gone away, and Firehouse has gone away. So
I sort of felt like I left a trail of
dead studios on you.
For a while, I was like, "Is it me? Am I
That's a little sad." But luckily though, the community that it's passed, it is interesting. It seems to be still kind of strong, which is really great, you know. Because I'm still in touch, obviously, with all the guys from Sig, you know, see Tom Hardesty always, you know, Greg Hayes, of course, Noah Snyder, I see all the time. I mean, there's a group of people that, you know, come through that world that are doing really, really well now. And I'm super proud of them that they've come that far and are doing such great things, you know. But if there's any more time for community, now is it, you know.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
I think, you know, letting people understand and know what you're up to and what's happening, you know. It's a new world, but this is, again, thanks for having us, because it's a great way to hopefully communicate to a few people, and hopefully word of mouth gets out that there's some people out there who want to talk with them and go, hey, come on by, and, you know, I got this studio and I do this and I do that and I can help with that or whatever, you know. So
That's awesome. Thank you, Brad, Jeremy, Martina, Grecco.
Yeah, thanks for having me along. To me, what's inspiring right now is this whole new world of, you know, composing and studying that, and it's a whole new career, and, you know, it's daunting, it's scary, but at the same time, I found like I have that innocence about music again. You know,
that's something. Yeah, that's a big thing. I understand exactly what you're saying.
It's like, oh wow, I can, and then I can double the first violins with the woodwinds, and then I can add this thing, and then here I'm gonna make a tempo change. It's like, it's great. That's priceless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I kind of share the same feeling right now. You know, like discovering this world of composing, and this is very inspiring, you know, like these gatherings that we're doing. It is awesome. Like we learned so much from this, and I'm really, really grateful. Thank you guys again. Let me really quick before we leave the room, I'm going to share my screen one last time. And this is to just show people your Instagram handles. So Jeremy's here. If you guys want to follow Jeremy, Brad, I think these are correct, right?
Muted.
Oh, sorry, I got on mute. What am I looking at here?
Is that your Instagram account, Noise Alchemy? And then
Noise Alchemy, yeah, is my Instagram account. Yeah, so I've got Instagram right now. I have a really awful webpage, by the way, right now. It has nothing to do with what's going on at my studio at the moment, but I've been super busy, and I'm trying to get that currently reworked. My son's been helping me out with that as well, so hopefully we'll have something up there. But you can get a hold of me at my Noise Alchemy Instagram, and that would work. Yeah.
Awesome. So for those who, you know, did screenshots of everyone like talking, these are their Instagram accounts. So tag them, Be My Ears, Music Cosmos. Mine is there. Grecco's there. Martina, and Jeremy and Brad. Again, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and
You too.
yeah, stay safe.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.